Astrid and Clint from the Worldschooling Q&A podcast join me to discuss their 4-year family odyssey through Mexico, Southeast Asia, and Europe. We dive into the mechanics of eclectic unschooling, the financial reality of remote work and a 2-month expense snapshot in Lisbon, Portugal, and the honest emotional impact of returning to traditional school. They share how travel transformed their family's communication and why their kids return more adaptable than ever. Listen to the end for our lightning round where we cover the best Indonesian comfort food and the travel stories that inspired it all. Welcome to the Wander World School podcast. I'm Susie, a travel-loving money nerd, mom of 2, and our family lives between Spain and Colorado. On this show, we discuss the stories, logistics, and finances of traveling families and the many ways to learn along the way. Today, we get to know Astrid, Vinje, and Clint Bush. Tell me where you're calling in from and a little more about your family.
Thanks, Susie. We are calling from the unusually warm day today in Brooklyn, New York.
Very cool. Tell me a little more about your overview of the family travels you've taken more recently.
We are originally from the Seattle area in Washington State in the U.S. We did do some full-time travel from 2018 to 2022, and then we went back to Seattle. That was where we were living for the past 3 years until 2025 when we decided to move across the U.S. to New York City.
We were full-time travel for a few years, in which case we visited mostly Southeast Asia, in Europe.
And Mexico.
Yeah, tons of Mexico. We came back to the U.S. We settled back down there in the Seattle area to be with the family.
And how old are your kiddos now?
Right now, they are 15 and 12.
And then we'll also share more about your podcast because if people are wanting to learn more about world schooling, that's a great place to start with the Q&A sessions that you have. I'd love to hear more about where travel started for each of you.
I was born and spent my childhood in Indonesia. Dad is American, so we would go back and forth growing up as a kid. International travel was part of my childhood. So I knew when I became a parent, I really wanted to continue that travel tradition.
For me, it was completely domestic. I grew up in Colorado, in a tiny town, Colorado. I went to high school in the Florence, Canyon City area, south of Colorado Springs. And then I went to college in Greeley. We road tripped a lot as a family. That's where my travel bug started. And then after college, I took 2.5 months and did a train trip across the U.S. That was the biggest step for me. Ultimately ended up moving to Seattle after that trip. And then 6 years later, I met Astrid. We flew to Italy, and that was our first international. I was completely hooked.
When was your Peace Corps time, Astrid?
From 2004 to 2006. And then after Peace Corps, I traveled solo or with some friends around Southeast Asia and then did a road trip around the U.S.
Yeah, road tripping actually has become one of the ways we world school too, because we almost always rent a vehicle of some sort when we're traveling and exploring a lot. We spent a lot of time in southern Spain, 3 months in southern Spain in La Dura, but we had a car the whole time. So we went all through southern Spain, Cadiz, Cordoba, Granada.
Very cool. Did you have to learn a language when you were in West Africa?
I just learned French. And then when I was in my village, I did learn some basic greetings in the local language. But I also recognized French would be a little bit better for me, for travel later on. So I really just focused on learning French.
Very cool. You started to give me a little bit of a rundown of the family travels that you've taken. Fill me in on what's that look like as you guys started traveling as a family.
Our introduction to world schooling was we had gone to a conference in BC, Canada, near Vancouver. And it was a family travel conference. And it was put on by a few full-time traveling families. And we were talking to everyone, and every excuse that we had not to travel, someone had an answer to it. Literally on the drive home, we were yeah, let's do this. Yeah. And I think this is cool. Before you ended that conference, they said, hey, if you sign up for next year's conference, you get a massive discount. And the next year's conference was Mexico. And so we were well, we have never been to Mexico. And so we signed up for Mexico. And then on the trip home, we were yeah, let's do this. We started basically planning over the next 9 months on our full-time travel. So we started in Mexico. We stayed 6 months in Mexico. And then we went to Europe. And so Italy, we figured that was a nice kind of interim
In
place in
France.
France. And then from there, we went to Southeast Asia because she still has family in Jakarta. We wanted to go to the Philippines. There was lots of reasons for us to be in Southeast Asia. So we kind of based it around seeing people we knew.
And then the pandemic hit. So we were in Southeast Asia.
Oh,
And
yeah.
2020 came around. And so that,
You were
because the
about
next
2
step,
years in to full-time
yeah,
travel
that
by
was
then.
Yeah.
2 years in. We were thinking like, okay, so we will go to Africa.
Yeah. That was the goal,
And then
to go to
the
Africa.
pandemic hit and we just went back to the States because,
Mhm.
Everything was so many logistics
yeah,
and complicated. Yeah.
yeah. Once 2020 kind of like settled down, we went back to Mexico in 2021 and then we traveled to Europe again. And so like our travel shifted to like what were the countries that were open or that like we could still travel through safely. We did the UK and Spain.
Yeah. We were also slowing down our travel. So when we first started our travels, we were in Mexico for 6 months, but
It's like a
a
month
month
at a
and a month, a
time and a
month, and a
month.
month,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
I think to people who don't travel full time, that doesn't seem like
Yeah.
that's
It
like,
seems like
whoa,
a
that's a
long
long
time.
time. But once you start traveling full time, a month is like nothing. That second stint around, we tried to slow it down a little bit.
Yep.
We did more house sitting, stayed in smaller towns.
Well, and something that our son had said, so we started traveling, he was like 5. When he was like 7 or 8, he was like, Mom, I feel like when we stay somewhere for a month, like just as I'm getting used to a place, then we have to go again. So we really took that to heart. When we travel now, it's like, okay, if we are going to fast travel, we'll let them know and like kind of give them some downtime too. But then if we're going to be slow traveling, just make sure that we stay in one spot and we allow them to sort of like acclimate at their own pace to the place that they're at.
Yeah.
You bring up a really good point that as kids get older, they have more opinions sometimes, which
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think is a cool thing about travel. As they get older, they can experience more and be part of the planning even sometimes and where we want to go. So you mentioned that your son was looking for maybe a little change of tempo, but overall, what has their thoughts been when it comes to full-time travel that you all did for those couple of years?
So what's really interesting for us is the last year was a big full circle moment for us because we had come back to the US and pretty stable for
3
almost 3
years. Yeah.
years. But last year what was different is we went to Budapest. There was a world schooling hub there. There was a big prom event and our daughter was the right age. And we reconnected with so many of the world schooling families. Cause that was the one thing, like we built community while we were traveling full time. I mean, all these world schooling families, these full time traveling families. And so we reconnected with them. Mira, our daughter, really got a lot of autonomy because where we were staying in Budapest is kind of central and
Hmm.
there was a lot of teens. So
Hmm.
we let her basically hang with the teens every evening. She kind of had a full circle moment where she realized like she loved that experience and that travel and the people there. And Julian really likes traveling. He likes being out and seeing new cultures and stuff. But then they also realize like the things that they love about being stationary and being in school. Because when we're here in the States, we don't homeschool. They're in school. And so it was kind of cool because it was like we're back in this lifestyle a little bit, both kind of traditional life, quote unquote, and world schooling. So that's been a fascinating adjustment and shift. Not always easy, I think, for us as parents, because if it was me, we just go full time travel again.
I think that's the biggest lesson or the biggest thing we gained from travel full time is the communication and taking time to like listen to what everybody's needs are. And we operate in a more democratic way. So, like, the kids have a say and we have a say and we talk through decisions instead of like one person sort of dictating to the rest of the family.
And travel gives many opportunities to have those conversations
Yeah.
because every day it's a new this or that. And so it does really encourage a lot of family conversations. When you were full time traveling, tell me a little more about what education looked like.
So, we homeschooled our kids when we were traveling. And I think I would say it's like eclectic unschooling actually because we did follow a curriculum sometimes but not like any set curriculum. Like a typical day we would have the kids like do some independent reading, practice Duolingo, maybe we'll watch like a video about a place that we're at, like a
Hmm.
historical video or
Yeah.
geographic video, and then we talk about it, or we'd watch some like science videos. Clint would assign them some math lessons.
Just math. Yeah.
But most of the learning was like, hey, we're going to a museum and we'll like experience it and then maybe we'll talk about it later. We are doing a zip line through the canopies in Costa Rica or something like that. Or we're going to go swim with whale sharks. Like,
Yeah.
I really just used our experiences as like the basis of the learning, as opposed to just like, okay, let's open up this book and let's read this chapter in the book.
And we do this here in the States too,
Right.
in the cities that we live in. Like there's so much culture around you and there's
Yeah.
so much history in the cities that we live in that like people just take it for granted. But that, yeah, I think that was the most of how we learned was just through experiences.
Yeah.
And then the math and the reading, all that stuff came like our son didn't read when we started traveling and he reads fine now. And they
Mhm.
did math and we put him back in school and they're like ahead of their classes. And so we're like, well, something right. So
Yeah.
Can you expand on that? How was that transition back to classes for the kids?
we were worried too. I mean, be honest. I mean,
Right.
the school system, especially in the US, or I mean, we'll just speak to the US, like when you're in the school system, they make you believe it's the only system. Like that you
Mhm.
cannot do anything else outside of the school system to be successful. That's not true for once. But even coming back, we were worried because we're like, we've been out of the school system
Yeah.
for 4 years. Our youngest son had never even been in school yet. And he's going into elementary school, like I think third
At the
grade.
time.
But we weren't really worried about them meeting friends because one thing we realized as we were world schooling and traveling, they became adaptable. Other kids would be around, they would adapt to situations, they would play, they'd reach out. Even our son, who's a little bit more introverted, he's still like, he'll go join a group of kids playing or something. Once they started school and the academics actually started, they both did incredibly fine. It was easy. The one thing that was a huge challenge was being reminded of how much our school systems rely on homework and how much stress and emphasis they put on busy work. And that's actually been a constant frustration of ours since we've gone back to public school. There's this false urgency in the intensity of the amount of work that they should be doing at this age. It's been challenging as parents, I think,
Yeah.
coming back to it. Yeah.
I think the mentality in the schools is if you're capable or if you're smart, you should be able to do more work. And more work equals like more learning. Instead of like, why don't you actually encourage them to do more thinking in a more advanced way?
We just realized we do more of that on a daily
Yeah, and
basis
those things are
in
practical.
life
Yeah.
that we don't teach in the schools at all. And
I feel like compared to their peers as well, that our kids are more critical about what's being presented to them. Travel just exposes you to different perspectives. So maybe there's no one right way. So I think
yeah.
they've carried that into like the rest of their life.
Absolutely. Some of those things just cannot be taught in a classroom in the same way, for sure. And well, thank you for sharing the experience transitioning back. What I hear from that is that there is ways to help support your kid through that transition and that kids have time to adjust and catch up. And that probably wherever they're at is where they should be. And just because school might be a little different, doesn't always mean that they're behind or anything. It just means that we need to adjust and that there's plenty of time to do that when transitioning back into a school environment or whatever the next steps are. What does languages look like?
Astrid, you speak multiple languages. We try to learn a little bit of language in other places that we go. So we learned a little Portuguese. I know a little bit of Indonesian. Our daughter's learning a little bit of Indonesian. Our son's learning a little bit of Japanese. It's not that we speak multiple languages as a family, but we all have a passion for language.
Give your family the ultimate travel tool, the gift of language. Preply's one-on-one native speaking tutors make world schooling more immersive and fun, fitting perfectly into your busy travel schedule. Whether you're preparing for Spain or Japan, start talking today. I've been using Preply for years with great success. Use the link in the show notes to get 70% off your first lesson.
Yeah, whenever we go somewhere, we do try and learn like how to say hello, how to say thank you. One thing I always like to learn is how to say it was delicious or it is delicious. Like when we were in Japan a couple years ago, I learned like it's delicious is oishi desu. And so then every time I'd go to a restaurant and like I'd be walking out the door, I'd be like, oishi desu. And then they're like, oh, thank you. Just a sign of respect instead of like assuming that everybody has to speak English all the time.
I do think everyone in the US should be bilingual, though. I absolutely think we should have at least
Yeah.
one other language. That's what we hope for our kids. Is just like they already have a passion for language. They're interested in it. We
Hmm.
tend to take language classes when we're in longer stays.
And I 100% agree. You should start way younger with languages in the US. I only had to do 2 years in high school and like one half year in middle school. So I did Spanish and then I did 3 years of German. But by the time you're in high school and it's not really a priority because you got 17 other things going on, but if you start younger, it really can make a difference. So I 100% agree. Every family is like, okay, this sounds amazing, but they're wondering about the financial and the logistical side of the journey. What did that look like before your big long term trip?
At the time, I thought, oh, if I'm going to be traveling full time, I have to have hundreds of thousands of dollars saved and blah, blah, blah. I did end up quitting my job, but Clint stayed on and they let him work remotely. I think it's much easier now to negotiate like a remote work situation if you're already employed to be able to work. I ended up getting a remote job in 2020 as
Mhm.
well. So then for like the second half of our full-time travels, both of us were working remotely. The other part was we had a home, and instead of selling it, we decided to put it for rent, partially because like the housing market in Seattle, like it would be stupid for us to sell because then we wouldn't be able to afford to come back to it. So again, like if you are a family and you don't have like the savings to do it to travel full time, like you don't necessarily have to quit your job if you can find a way to continue your job remotely. You don't have to sell your house. You could potentially just put it for rent if you own property. So
It seemed like everyone has a different financial story.
that's true.
So, and
Yeah.
like every family we met, they had a different way of doing it. We read all the Facebook groups, the world schooling groups. We see
Yeah.
questions all the time. And that was one of the reasons we started our podcast was like, people have so many questions about this. We're speaking from a point of privilege too. I understand not everyone is in a situation that's can be easy for them. But we had someone actually reach out to us a couple of years ago and she was just like, oh, I want to do this. It sounds fascinating, but I'm in a job. I'm a single mom. I don't understand how we can do this. She actually just messaged me like 2 months ago, and she's like, "I have a remote job, and we just left to go to Europe." And I was like, "That's awesome!" Like, if you're motivated, there's opportunities there. Sometimes you have to be creative, though. Nothing about this is easy, nor should it be. I mean, it's
Mm.
traveling, at least in my opinion, the point of travel is to force you to adapt and learn new cultures, and that makes you uncomfortable. You don't grow unless you're uncomfortable. It's not going to be easy, but it will be rewarding if you can get through it. So,
Yeah.
You're right. It takes effort. It takes planning sometimes. Maybe you can't take off on a longer trip today, but you could take a test trip and try out the lifestyle a little bit. And like you said, set up the systems to rent your house out or whatnot. And then as you build more confidence, you can take a longer trip or as you find remote work or build up some other financial reserves or whatnot. And I always like to share that 1 month spending snapshot. And I see you shared a little bit more about your time in Portugal.
We ended up renting a an apartment, and so part of that, I
it
think
was a short term rental. So, our lodging was more inflated than normal.
What time of year was it?
Fall, the
December.
shoulder
Yeah.
season.
I bet those are great months, though.
It's beautiful. And we also picked a location that was a little bit more central to
Mhm.
everything.
And because we work remotely, we wanted a place that had, like, space to work and
Mhm.
decent internet.
Lisbon specifically, we spent, I think, 3K a month
Yeah,
on rent
right.
while we were there. So we were there 2 months. It was about 6,000 for those 2 months.
I wanna say for food, it was maybe up to $2,000
Groceries
expense.
seemed a lot cheaper
Yeah.
too, or like maybe 20% cheaper than well, 20% cheaper than Seattle, 30% cheaper than New York City. So
But
yeah.
we ate out a lot. We would do at least one meal out per day. But we're like, well, we're here in this country. We might as well try the cuisine of the country. The other expense was transportation. Again, we would take like local trans. We would do like the metro around, but we also rented a car to do like a road trip. And so that was actually not too bad.
So car rentals in Portugal are insanely affordable. They have Uber, but they also have Bolt, and that is the way to go. Bolt, sometimes we'd have a 30-minute drive somewhere, and we could get a Bolt for all four of us.
Yeah, it ended up being
Like,
less expensive than doing the
yeah,
public
would cost like
transportation.
10 euro for like a
Yeah.
30-minute trip. And so the
By the
Bolt
time
is
you have a
definitely,
family, you realize like,
yeah.
wow, we could like suffer on this tram forever or
As soon as you add up the tram costs, you're like, oh, okay, that's pricey,
And
especially if
then
we're doing it every day.
the
yeah.
other cost we had were like activity costs. And because of the pop-up that we did, and then also just like hanging out with people, I think it ended up being $500 for the month for activities. But like that included museums, would go
Day
to
trips.
day day trips, or like we took a cooking class. That to me is like part of the education cost, right?
Yeah.
Like this
Absolutely.
is the learning, the hands-on learning, and I don't want to like miss out on that. And then I think the last part of our budget was just miscellaneous expenses.
And that stuff
Um,
all ends up being about the same as it is your daily
yeah,
costs
yeah,
here. One of our values is just experiencing a lot when we travel. We're always like open to share what we spend on our trips, and
yeah.
we acknowledge that we're higher than a lot of people. We're also less than a lot of people. We've also known people that travel way more bougie than we do.
It all depends on where you're coming from, what your resources are, and there's something for everyone at every price point. And sometimes it's just helpful to see, okay, well, around this price point, this might be my experience. And is that worth that adventure for me? Or should I pick another country where maybe I can stretch my dollar a little more because that's where our family is at this place in our journey. So it's all just about learning from others and finding what works best for us. I also like to touch on the challenges and to bring back that quote is that it may not be easy, but it will be rewarding. And some of these challenges are the parts that make it not always easy.
One of the things that I would mention is that it's a roller coaster of intense socialization and famine. So
Like social famine.
like social famine.
Not the food kind.
Yeah, especially if you're participating in these world schooling hubs and stuff, you for a week, you're just absorbed in this crazy amazingness of socializing every day, all day long. And it can be very nourishing and exhausting. And then you can go months where it's just you and your family. We learned to cope with it. You learned that we actually needed both. We needed those ebbs and flows. But at first, I think it was hard in those moments when you have a lot of intense socialization. There's especially early on when you're world schooling, you think, "Oh, I need to take this all in because I will never get this opportunity again." And then so there's this fear of missing out that happens, but then there's like self-sacrificing that happens too because then you're not taking care of yourself, you're not
Yeah.
recharging, and that stuff becomes really, really critical. Just trying to understand how you and your family needs downtime and recharge time and that you're going to go through like these kind of emotional spikes. You don't really know how you're going to respond to it.
One thing that we always tried to do, like we'd have like a meetup with another family that we could look forward to. So like, okay, we're doing this 1 month period here in this place for just us. But then at the end of the month, we'll meet up with these families or we'll go to this hub or something like that. And then another thing in terms of like feeling grounded was we would have a world map. We had this cloth world map, and everywhere we would go, we'd put it up on the wall. So then it's like, okay, it doesn't matter like the location, this is
Mhm.
home right now.
I think one challenge that people assume they're going to have is safety. To be honest,
Oh, travel's dangerous.
that was never an issue for us. We just never really felt unsafe. So I think that's a challenge myth that is easy to build up in your head. The only other thing I want to mention was one of the challenges for me was actually coming back. That hit me really hard. I got like pretty depressed for a few years. Like make sure you talk about the emotional impact that it might take, but just be open to having conversations. You grow differently when you're traveling full time and your needs change. And when you come back, it can feel like regressing. That's how it felt for me. Because almost any of us that travel full time are going to settle back down somewhere at some point in time. When you do settle back down, it can be challenging for sure.
And actually, Clint, you bring up a good point because there's like a misconception that travel is going to fix all our problems.
Yeah,
But what it does is actually it just brings the problems to light.
yeah,
And so you have
surfaces
to
them.
like address it.
And I think there's so much enthusiasm when you're heading out the door. You don't always think about the return journey.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
I've been in situations where I'm like, I know we had so many amazing experiences as a family. And then here we are back with friends and family that we love, but you want to share that. But you also know that there's only so much that other people care about what you have, even if they love you. There's a lot to consider there. But let's also talk about all the amazing parts. What have been your favorite things about world schooling?
Man.
For me, it's just I just love being immersed in culture that I'm not familiar with. It's like one of my favorite things to do is go to a grocery store or a convenience store in any new location that we're at. Grocery shopping becomes so routine to us when we're living somewhere, right? But then you go to another country and A, you're learning a new grocery store, which is always challenging. But B, you don't understand the language if it's a place that you don't understand the language.
Yeah.
Two, pricing's totally different. Three, the ingredients are different, the items are different, cultures are different. It's just and
Yeah.
everyone has to do it. It's like one of the best ways to see how everyday living is because everyone has to go to the grocery store. I love that. It is so nourishing to me.
It just struck me just now as I really appreciate like the freedom that comes with traveling. Like I learned how to ride a scooter when we were in Indonesia
Mhm.
and we spent like 2 months in Bali. It would take us about like 30 minutes of a scooter ride to go from like the center of Ubud to our Airbnb. We each had a scooter and then one kid would ride with a parent and just like driving the scooter home and like up and down the hills and going by like rice paddies and thinking like this is amazing.
Or it just remind me of too, like when you're saying driving through the rice paddies, what's mundane to someone who's been around it all their time,
Yeah.
it's so mundane to someone who's there, who sees it all the time. But to us, seeing the rice fields every day,
Yeah.
like it's just this like amazing experience to see something that's outside of your norm that is normal for other people. And then I think also just the community we met
Mhm.
while
Mhm.
traveling. It's a tight knit group, but it's a large group. It's like both large and small at the same time. You
Yeah.
do it long enough, like a few years, you'll run into all your circles will start crossing. Um,
And overlap.
Let's talk about the resources that you share, because I know you have a lot of amazing resources to help people that are starting out. They have the questions. What are some of those resources that you've been working on?
We have a podcast too. It's called World Schooling Q&A. We're seeing like all these questions on like the World Schooling Facebook groups and wouldn't it be great if like we could give people answers to these cuz
yeah,
and so we just decided to like tailor each episode to answer a specific question. A lot of it is like information that I also share on my website, The Wandering Daughter. I also share information about the places we visited, things that we travel with. Another way for me to help like families that are interested in this kind of lifestyle.
there's like budget worksheets you've created, and there's packing things. A lot of that we're still trying to figure out a little bit on how we can be give back to the community or help
Yeah,
other people
helpful for
travel,
people.
or just because a lot of those introductory conferences are gone now. So we've thought about like, is there ways to bring that back? Is
Yeah.
there like, webinars or workshops or things that you can do that people can join?
Yeah.
And because again, it's just going back to the source for us. We started because we got to talk to people who were doing it.
Yeah.
And I think that's so critical. Just talk to someone who's done it.
Mhm.
Luckily, there's a lot of people doing it now, and there's lots of world schooling groups out there, but it can still feel intimidating. you can find the people who are answering the questions, and they're the people traveling or who have traveled in the past. So just private message them and say, "Hey, can I pick your brain for an hour?" or something like that. And I think that that's where we want to kind of give back, is like just be open to conversation.
And I like with your podcast, some of those questions seem, maybe when you've been doing it for a while, seem very kind of basic, right? Like I loved your episodes about like the backpacks and things like that, right? But if we actually get into those details, it can offer so much, I think, support to someone who's just starting out to get an idea of where they want to start out. And maybe that's the exact route they choose, or they get enough information, they find something different. It's great to have a great resource that like dives into each of these different topics individually. And what other resources have you all used?
We love using any sort of planning app. Notion is kind of one of our go-tos right now. I'm a programmer, so I sometimes will build little things, little tools and stuff to help us.
Google Sheets is also just helpful for me for budgeting and keeping track of our travel budget and stuff. In fact, I actually have like a Google Sheet template on my website. I also use that Google Sheets to keep track of the kids' world schooling records, like what we've been learning and things like that. So I also have a template for that as well. But
Lainey Liberty, she's now
she's
based
based
permanently
in
out of
Mexico.
Guanajuato, Mexico. She still does teen stuff, like these teen excursions
Mhm.
that are great.
Something that we've kind of mentioned it a couple times during this episode is the pop-up hubs.
Yeah.
So, like, we did one in Mexico through Anahata with Patty Rojas. And then we also do the World Schooling pop-up hub that's organized by the Carlson family.
And then there's a number of them that come and go, but there's like, those are some of the staple ones.
And I did want to bring back to that original conference that you mentioned. Do you remember the name of the conference?
It's called Family Adventure Summit. It ran 3 years. It was awesome. It just had an awesome vibe. It was running the same time Lady Liberty was running her World Schooling Project
Summit.
World School Summit. We never got to make it to hers. We always wanted to, and so
Yeah.
yeah.
But I'm going to link all of your resources, especially your website and your podcast for sure. But I like to end on a lightning round. Okay, so you can only ever visit or live in 3 countries. What are they?
Mexico, Indonesia, and Spain.
Mexico, Indonesia, and Portugal.
Good. So you guys can still like wave each other across the border. Best or worst food that you've ever tried?
The best would be buncha in Hanoi. It's a pork vermicelli soup.
My best is, and I'm biased, it's soto ayam. It's like a Indonesian soup that has like some noodles and stuff, but it's Indonesian.
Yeah.
Yum. And
Worst, what
worst.
you? I don't have a
Worst.
worst, but you have
Okay.
a worst.
My
I think.
worst is it's called natto, and it's like fermented Japanese like soybeans, and it's a little bit slimy. I tried it, and I couldn't.
did you not say it's delicious when you left that restaurant? Do you have any favorite travel related movies, books, or stories?
For sure. Secret Life of Walter Mitty is amazing. It's just inspiring in a lot of ways. And The Way, which is about the Camino de Santiago, that's a beautiful movie as well.
Mine is this book I read in my 20s called Tales of a Female Nomad, and it was like an inspiration for me to like travel solo.
One honorable mention, Why Do You Love Me? I think is what it's called. Indonesia is amazing, and there's lots to see in Indonesia. This movie specifically is cool because they do a road trip across Java, and
Island
so
Java.
it's a good way to see parts of Java, just see another part of Indonesia.
Yeah.
But it's only the parents watch that one.
Okay, put a caveat on that. We were doing some research with my son, and if I'm remembering, Indonesia is the 6th biggest country by landmass because of just all the islands, and it stretches out so far. If I were to have guessed the order of how, the big countries, I don't think I would have guessed it to be number 6 landmass wise. I think that it just shows how much there is to explore in Indonesia, even outside of course, the hotspots. If you could live in one city for an entire year, what city would it be?
I would say for me, the city of Yogyakarta, it's in central Java in Indonesia, and it's like the cultural center of Java, essentially. The Sultan used to, or he still lives there.
Mhm.
He's more just ceremonial power now, not really actual political power, but um, I just love the vibe of the city.
Very cool. What is one piece of advice for a family just starting out?
don't overthink it. You can plan, but at some point, just jump in. You're never going to know until you actually do it, like what it's going to be like.
I think my advice now is just be open to something different. Travel for me is seeing something that I don't know. Yes, of course, sometimes we like comforts from home. I like going to coffee shops in every country I go to. At the same time, I want things to be different. And I think my advice is just go into travel knowing that it's different and that that's okay.
And as you're planning, check out your resources, the Q&A podcast, the Wandering Daughter website to get some ideas of where to start, but then just hit the road and know that you're going to adapt and it's going to be different, but it'll be worth it. So Very cool. I'll make sure to link all of your resources in the show notes. And you are in New York City now.
Yeah, this is basically our home until we're empty nesters.
At least that's the plan for now. The thing about us is like we're not going to be in one place forever for sure. So like for the time being, this is where we're at.
We're already doing plenty of planning with the folks that will be empty nesters in the coming years or already empty nesters. We're all planning on having lots of travels together.
I love it. That's cool. Thank you so much.
Because we appreciate it.
That's a wrap on today's episode. If you enjoyed it, please do me a huge favor and tell a friend or traveling family about the show. And hey, don't miss out on bonus content, behind the scenes, and more on Instagram, Facebook, or Substack. Thanks for tuning in. Go send this episode to a friend. See you next time.